The hidden treasure of Mateo. Once upon a time, in a quiet village nestled between green hills and golden fields in Peru, there lived a man named Mateo. Everyone in the village knew Mateo for one reason. He was the most miserly man anyone had ever met. While the villagers shared meals during festivals and helped one another during difficult times, Mateo did something very different. He counted his coins again and again, every single day. Mateo had boxes filled with money hidden everywhere. Some were buried in his garden, others were tucked inside the walls of his house. A few were hidden beneath the loose boards under his bed. Every night before sleeping, he checked them carefully, making sure none were missing. But despite all his wealth, Mateo lived like a man with nothing. He wore the same faded clothes year after year, and his meals were simple and often barely enough to keep him strong. When rain leaked through his roof during the stormy season, he simply placed old pots and bowls under the drops instead of repairing the house. "Why spend money fixing the roof?" Mateo would say with a shrug. "The bowls catch the water just fine." His neighbors often shook their heads with pity. One afternoon, his neighbor Isabella stopped by and asked him gently, "Mateo, what is the use of all your money if you live like this?" Mateo only smiled and tapped the pouch hanging from his belt. "One day," he said proudly, "I will be the richest man in this village. Then everyone will understand why I saved every coin." Years passed. Mateo's money kept growing, but something else was happening at the same time. His health was slowly fading. The sleeping on the cold floor made his back stiff and bent. Working by weak candlelight made his eyes ache and blur. His poor meals made him weak and tired. Still, he refused to spend a single coin. Then one day, a traveler arrived in the village. His name was Diego. Diego was young, cheerful, and full of life. Though he did not look rich, he carried something far more valuable: curiosity and determination. All he owned was a small bag, a notebook, and a wooden flute. He rented a small room near Mateo's house. Every morning, Mateo watched Diego with disapproval. The young man bought fresh fruit, warm bread, and milk from the market. "Such waste," Mateo muttered. "Spending money on luxuries." But Mateo soon noticed something interesting. Diego also bought books. Every evening he sat outside reading. He purchased tools and practiced building small furniture. He bought materials to learn pottery. Sometimes he even paid the village elders to teach him about farming and trade. One day, Mateo could no longer hold his curiosity. "Why do you waste so much money on these things?" he asked. Diego smiled kindly. "I'm not wasting money, sir. I'm investing in myself." Mateo frowned. "What does that even mean?" Diego explained calmly. "Every book makes me wiser. Every skill makes me more useful. Every healthy meal gives me strength to work harder and think clearly. The best investment anyone can make is in themselves." Mateo laughed. "Foolish thinking. The best investment is saving money and protecting it." Diego looked at him thoughtfully. "But what good is money if you are too weak to enjoy it? What good is wealth if you have no knowledge to grow it? What good are coins if they only sit in the dark?" Mateo waved him away and returned to counting his coins. Months went by. Slowly, Diego's efforts began to show results. Because he could read and write well, the village council hired him to help manage records. Because he had learned carpentry, villagers asked him to repair doors and tables. Because he understood herbs, people came to him for help when they were sick. And when Diego played his flute during village celebrations, everyone gathered to listen. Through these gatherings, he made friends and built strong connections. His life was growing brighter every day. Meanwhile, Mateo's life was growing harder. One evening, Mateo fell terribly ill. A strong fever left him weak and trembling in his dark, damp house. The village doctor visited and looked around with concern. "Mateo," the doctor said, "you need medicine, good food, and this house must be repaired. The damp air is making you worse." Mateo swallowed weakly. "How much will it cost?" "About 400 coins," Mateo gasped. 400 coins? Impossible! He refused the treatment. But his illness only grew worse. After weeks of suffering, he finally had no choice but to pay for the medicine and repairs, and by then, it cost even more. As Mateo slowly recovered, he spent long days sitting by the window, watching the village outside. And every day he saw Diego walking confidently through life, healthy, skilled, respected. One evening, Diego knocked on his door carrying a bowl of warm soup. "I heard you were sick," Diego said. "I made this for you." Mateo felt tears fill his eyes. This young man, whom he had once mocked, was now showing him kindness. "Diego," he said quietly, "I think I have been wrong all my life." Diego sat beside him. "You were not wrong," he said gently. "You just forgot something important." "What did I forget?" "You forgot that you are your greatest treasure." Mateo listened carefully. "Money can disappear," Diego continued, "but your health, your knowledge, and your skills, they stay with you. They help you grow, earn, and live happily." Mateo looked down at his trembling hands. "Is it too late for me?" Diego smiled warmly. "It is never too late to begin." And from that day forward, Mateo changed. He repaired his house properly. He began eating healthy food. He bought glasses so his eyes would not strain. He even asked Diego to teach him how to read and write, something he had never learned before. Slowly, something wonderful happened. Mateo became stronger. He discovered the joy of learning. He learned simple carpentry and began helping neighbors fix small things. For the first time in years, he made friends and laughed with people. His money was no longer buried in the ground. It was helping him live a better life. Within a year, Mateo had transformed. He still saved money, but now he understood balance. One evening, Mateo and Diego stood together watching the sunset paint the sky with gold and orange. "Thank you," Mateo said softly. "You taught me the most valuable lesson in life." Diego smiled. "What lesson is that?" Mateo looked at the horizon and said, "The greatest treasure is not money hidden in boxes. It is investing in ourselves, our health, our mind, our skills, and our happiness." And for the first time in many years, Mateo smiled a smile that came from deep within his heart. Have you ever sat in a place that used to feel like home? And suddenly it didn't anymore? Not because the walls changed, not because the world ended, but because the people who made it feel alive were no longer there. If you've ever felt that kind of silence, stay with me. This story is different, and somewhere inside it, you might find yourself. There is a place in Tanzania called Kijani Plains. It's not a place people travel to. It's a place people are born into, grow in, and often never leave. In that village lived a man named Tendai. Tendai was not the kind of man people gathered around for entertainment. He didn't talk much, didn't laugh loudly, didn't try to stand out. If anything, he blended into the background, but he had a quiet way of being present. He worked with his hands, fixing things, carrying loads, helping where needed. Nothing about his life looked special from the outside. But there was a time when his world felt full. His wife, Amara, brought warmth into their home without trying. She didn't need to say much either. The way she moved, the way she hummed while cooking, the way she sat beside him in the evenings, it was enough. They didn't have children, they didn't have wealth, but they had rhythm. A simple, steady life that made sense. Until one year, it stopped making sense. The rains came late that season. Crops struggled. The air felt dry, uneasy. And then Amara fell sick. It wasn't sudden. It was slow. The kind of sickness that makes you hope at first, and then slowly takes that hope away. Tendai tried everything he knew. Local remedies, long walks to find help, quiet prayers he barely knew how to form. But nothing changed. One night, and as the wind moved softly outside, Amara's breathing faded, and just like that, she was gone. There are moments in life that divide everything into before and after. That was Tendai's moment. After the burial, people came around. Voices filled the compound. Hands touched his shoulders. Words were spoken. But after a few days, it all disappeared. The footsteps stopped. The voices faded. The days became long and empty. Tendai didn't cry loudly. He didn't break down in front of anyone. He just became quiet. A different kind of quiet. He stopped sitting outside in the evenings, stopped going where people gathered. Even his work slowed down, not because he was lazy, but because nothing inside him was pushing him forward anymore. One night, sitting alone in the dark, he spoke out loud, not even sure why. God, if you are still there, why does it feel like you removed everything that mattered? No answer came, but the question stayed. Days turned into months, and something strange began to happen. Not outside, inside. Tendai started noticing things he had ignored before. The sound of the wind moving through dry grass. The way mornings arrived quietly before the sun appeared. The small struggles of people he passed without thinking. He didn't suddenly feel happy, but he started paying attention. One afternoon, while walking back from the fields, he saw a boy struggling to lift a heavy container of water. Tendai paused. For a moment, he almost kept walking. Then he turned back, lifted the container without saying a word, and carried it to the boy's home. No conversation, no thank you, just action. And then he left. A few days later, he fixed a broken fence for an old man who couldn't do it himself. Another day, he helped patch a leaking roof before the rain returned. He didn't announce any of it. He didn't plan to become helpful. It just started happening, not because he felt strong, but because doing nothing felt heavier. Years passed. People began to notice him again, but differently this time. Not as a man who had everything together, but as someone who showed up quietly without needing recognition. Tendai never spoke about his loss, but somehow people felt understood around him. Then one season, everything shifted again. Tendai fell ill. This time, his body refused to cooperate. He couldn't walk far, couldn't work, couldn't even cook for himself. And as he lay there staring at the same ceiling day after day, an old fear returned, and the same question, in a different form. Now what? The first day, no one came. The second day, someone knocked. It was the boy whose water he once carried, now older, standing awkwardly at the door with food in his hands. The next day, another person came. Then another. And then more. Within a week, the house that had been silent for years was no longer quiet. People filled the space. Someone swept his compound. Someone repaired his door. Someone stayed just to sit with him. No announcements were made. No plans were organized. It just happened. Tendai watched it all, confused. He hadn't asked for help. He hadn't even expected it. One evening, as he sat propped against the wall, he said softly, "I thought I was alone all these years." An old man sitting nearby shook his head. "You weren't alone. You were planting things you couldn't see." That night, for the first time in a long time, Tendai didn't feel empty. Not because everything was fixed, but because something finally made sense. When he recovered, he didn't go back to the life he had before, because he understood now. That season of losing, that silence, that loneliness, it wasn't the end of his life. It was the beginning of a different kind of purpose. Years later, when Tendai passed peacefully, people came from across Kijani Plains, not because they were told to, but because in one way or another their lives had been touched by a man who once thought he had nothing left to give. So hear this carefully. Sometimes life removes the noise, not to punish you, but to reveal something deeper. Sometimes the people you lose are not replaced in the same way, but what grows in their absence can reach further than you ever imagined. Loneliness can feel like an ending, but sometimes it's just the space where something new begins. If you are in that space right now, don't rush to fill it. Don't assume it means something is wrong with you. You may not see it yet, but something is being built in you. Quietly, patiently. Something that one day will reach people in ways you never expected.